After the defeat of Arthas, the Lich King, the Dark Pact Sylvanas struck with the Valkyr forged her bond with the jailer. Through the years, these winged sisters faithfully served the Dark Lady, even if it meant sacrificing themselves on her behalf. Now, Sylvanas calls her 9 Valkyr to fight for her one last time. I'm Fintusius and welcome to my normal and heroic the 9 guide. If you're interested in other languages, don't forget to enable the subtitle feature and pick the one you're after in the YouTube video. The 9 boss encounter is going to be a 2-phase encounter with phase 1 and 2 overlapping for a brief moment. In this fight, you'll be facing off against 2 out of the 3 remaining Valkyrs of Sylvanas, with the third one joining the fray once either of the first 2 reaches 10% or 15% health on heroic. The other 6 will also play a part in the encounter, however, you will not engage them directly. This is a nice lore touch, as those are the 6 that have already sacrificed themselves to save Sylvanas from death during their time on Azeroth. Over the duration of the entire encounter, Skia will be casting an ability known as Call of the Valkyr. This will summon forth 3 out of the 6 possible Valkyr abilities at random, which you've guessed it will add a lot of variance to the encounter. Forgive my Valkyr's pronunciations, I've tried my best. Agatha's Eternal Blade will form several images to slash out in straight lines, so just like the Denathrius Massacre, but darker. Those will inflict 50,000 physical damage and knock a target back if it actually survived. I recommend avoiding those. Dashla's Mighty Impact will debuff several players with large shadow circles that will deal 25,000 damage to all players within it upon Dashla's impact. Make sure to move out from allies with those. Unhealed Bright Aegis will create a large shield that will reduce the Valkyr's damage taken by 90% if they stand within it. Make sure your tanks move out with the bosses out of those. Aradness Falling Strike will mark several locations that you will slash after 8 seconds for 15,000 shadow damage each. For each location, if no players are struck, she will instead deal 30,000 shadow damage to all players, so make sure to have at least 1 player per location soaking those slashes. Brynja's Mournful Dirge will be a debuff that affects several players. It will deal minor ticking damage every 1 second for 6 seconds while also forming a circle around them that will explode for 27,000 shadow damage when it expires to players that would find themselves in it. Make sure to stay away from allies with those. Lastly, Artura's Crushing Gaze will mark a player for impact that will deal 125,000 frost damage after 8 seconds, divided evenly between all players within the impact zone, so make sure you stack with allies for this ability. You could also move away from allies and use an immunity to survive the hit on your own, making your healers and raid leader happy, well, for a brief second at least. Having covered that, let's get back to our first 2 Valkyrs as you'll be facing them at the beginning of the encounter. Kira, upon reaching 100 energy, will be using Wings of Rage, which will pull all players to her location. Once she completes the cast, she will deal 50,000 physical damage to all players within 10 yards, while also stunning them for 10 seconds. Make sure to run out of this cast. She will also spawn a formless mass ad that will need to get cleaved down and interrupted, as it is going to be casting Siphon Vitality, which will deal damage to all players while healing the ad. Lastly, she'll have a tank swap ability known as Unending Strike. Every cast will deal 50,000 physical damage and apply a 10% increased damage taken debuff for 25 seconds on top of damaging the raid with Repeating Slash, which is going to be a hit that deals 5,000 physical damage to all players per stacks of debuff on the tank, so make sure the other tank taunts after about 3 stacks. Sine, the second Valkyr, upon reaching 100 energy, will be using Reverberating Refrain, which, contrary to Kira, will be pushing all players away from her location for 7 seconds. Once the channel is over, she'll damage all players that are farther than 10 yards from her for 50,000 shadow damage while also fearing them for 6 seconds. This time, make sure to stay close. On top of this, she will be casting 2 interruptible casts. Song of Dissolution is a pulsating AoE channel that will deal damage to all players over 6 seconds and become stronger every 1.5 seconds, as it will be applying a stacking dot debuff on every tick. This will be a high priority interruptible cast. The next one will be Soulful Blast, which is a simple cast that will deal damage to her current target for 25,000 shadow damage. Feel free to interrupt it at will, as long as you prioritize interrupts on both the Song channel and the Siphon Vitality cast from the ad. Once Sina or Kira reach 15% health on Heroic or 10% health on Normal, Skia will join the fight, thus beginning Phase 2. This overlap can be quite deadly, as during that short period of time you'll have to face off against all 3 Valkyrs at the same time, knowing that the Call of the Valkyr ability is still ongoing. The best way to deal with this is to make sure both bosses are being damaged equally, so that they'll both be around 10 or 15% once Phase 2 starts. At that point, I recommend using Bloodlust and cooldowns if possible to ensure a smooth transition into Phase 2. Once the first 2 Valkyrs are defeated, only Skia will remain, but remember that the Call of the Valkyrs will persist until the end of the encounter. The most important ability Skia will be using is Fragments of Destiny, which will apply dispellable debuffs to a few players that will damage them for about 3000 frost damage every second, but will jump to the nearest player once dispelled, and this effect stacks. Once all fragments are on the same player, dispelling it will form a Shard of Destiny, which will create a big frost zone that will deal 10,000 damage every second to anybody standing within it, and will last until the fight is over. The best way for you to deal with these fragments is to assign a player, likely a ranged healer or DPS, to which you'll be sending your debuffed raiders to. That way, healers can be prepared for the incoming ticking damage on that player while being visible to other raiders, as he'll be standing away from the rest of the raid and be pre-positioned in a way that will safely spawn the Shard of Destiny zone. Aside from that, Skia will be using Pierce Soul, a heavy tank swap hit that will deal 60,000 physical damage and add a stacking debuff that reduces her target's movement speed and healing received by 10%. Lastly, she will be casting Resentment, which is going to deal about 4000 AoE damage every second to the raid for 12 seconds. If possible, rotate healing cooldowns on this. While this covers the entirety of the fight on normal difficulty, on Heroic, Skia will gain 2 additional abilities. The first one is going to be Link Essence, which will bind some players together and as a result will radiate 60% of all damage taken to other bound players, so avoid taking damage if it's not required. Keep in mind that this can create some pretty bad chain reaction if you were to deal with Fragments of Destiny debuffs or Valkyr debuffs on top. The other heroic ability you'll have to deal with will be Word of Recall, and for this one, you'll have to pay attention and react quickly, as this will repeat the last 3 Call of the Valkyr abilities. However, this time around, instead of having small delays between them, they'll happen at the same time, which can create some deadly overlaps. The key to dealing with it is to be aware of which of the Valkyr call abilities you'll have to deal with, such as pre-positioning yourself for soaks or spreads. You can also be a modern day and age WoW gamer and use a recall aura that will help you keep track which Word of Recall abilities you'll have to deal with. Link will be in the video description. There is no real DPS or healing check in this second phase, so make sure to manage these Fragments of Destiny debuffs properly, as well as Words of Recall on Heroic, and you'll be set on the path to epic loot in no time. If you want to check out additional tips and raid notes, you can find out more in my Discord, as I'll have a pinned section for boss talks. This was my The 9 boss guide. If you enjoyed it, feel free to hit the like button, and if you decide to subscribe, I'll see you hopefully in the next one. Goodbye.